When you think of black wealth, you probably think of Oprah, Jay-Z, or LeBron. But long before they made their first million, a hidden class of black elites had already built empires. In a time of brutal oppression, they created generational wealth through real estate, finance, and industry, laying the first blueprints for black legacy in America. These aren't rags to riches stories. These are dynasties forged in fire. Get ready to uncover the untold history of America's original black elite. Our journey starts way back, not in the Gilded Age, but when the United States was just being born, with a man who was born a free man in Philadelphia in the year 1766. His name was James Forten, and he would become a titan of industry and the patriarch of one of the first and most powerful black families in America. His story isn't just about money. It's about patriotism, brilliant innovation, and a deep commitment to the abolitionist cause that would become his family's mission for generations. Forten grew up surrounded by the American Revolution. At just 14, he joined the fight for independence, serving on the warship Royal Louis. He was captured by the British and held on a brutal prison ship. Even as a teenager, his character was unbreakable. He turned down an offer for a comfortable life in England, choosing to stay a prisoner of war, loyal to the new United States. When he was finally released, Forten went back to Philly and got an apprenticeship in the only world he knew, shipbuilding. He worked in the sail loft of Robert Bridges, where the huge canvases that powered global trade were made. And this is where Forten's genius took over. He wasn't satisfied with old methods. He invented a brand new type of sail that gave ships greater speed and control, a game changer in maritime technology. That invention was his key to a fortune. When his boss retired in 1798, Forten bought the entire business and quickly made it one of the most successful in Philadelphia. At a time when segregation was the law of the land, Forten's workshop was different. He hired an integrated workforce of black and white craftsmen, all working together. By the early 1800s, James Forten wasn't just a rich black businessman. He was one of the wealthiest men in Philadelphia, with a fortune estimated at around $100,000, a staggering sum that would be worth millions today. But Forten's real legacy wasn't just the money. It was how he used that money as a weapon in the fight for freedom. He poured his fortune into the abolitionist movement, funding newspapers and backing anti-slavery groups. The famous American Anti-Slavery Society was even organized in his home. His house on Lombard Street became a major stop on the Underground Railroad, a safe haven for those escaping the slave-holding South. This mission for justice became the Forten family's identity. James and his wife, Charlotte, didn't raise their children to be lazy socialites. They raised them to be soldiers in the war for equality. His sons took over the family business and continued the activism. His daughters married into another prominent abolitionist family, the Purvises, creating a multi-generational dynasty of activism. His granddaughter, Charlotte Forten Grimke, became a famous poet and teacher who documented her time teaching newly freed slaves after the Civil War. When James Forten died in 1842, his funeral was one of the largest Philadelphia had ever seen. The Forten family proves that the story of early black wealth is inseparable from the fight for black liberation. From the abolitionist North, we now head down to the post-Reconstruction South, a place of incredible danger, but for a few, also a place of incredible opportunity. Here in Memphis, Tennessee, we find the towering figure of Robert Reed Church, a man born into slavery who would rise to become the South's first black millionaire. His story is one of surviving unimaginable violence and having the genius to turn a city's disaster into a family dynasty. Born in 1839 to an enslaved mother and a white steamboat captain, Church grew up working on the Mississippi River. He learned the ins and outs of business from the bustling river trade. After gaining his freedom during the Civil War, he moved to Memphis in 1865 and started to build his life. His first businesses were small, a saloon, a restaurant, but his success made him a target. During the horrifying Memphis riot of 1866, a white mob attacked his saloon. They shot him, stole his money, and left him for dead. But Robert Church didn't die. And in an unbelievable act of defiance, he refused to leave Memphis. He promised he would stay and build his empire in the very city that tried to kill him. Church's big break came from an even bigger tragedy, the yellow fever epidemics of the 1870s. As the disease tore through Memphis, people fled in terror, and the city's economy completely collapsed. Property was worthless. But where everyone else saw death, Robert Church saw the opportunity of a lifetime. While others ran, he stayed, and he started buying up land. A lot of it. He bought commercial buildings and empty lots for pennies on the dollar. When the plague finally ended and people came back, Memphis was a new city, and Robert Church owned a huge piece of it. His real estate empire became the cornerstone of a massive fortune, estimated to be worth over $1 million by the early 1900s. He became one of the most powerful landowners in Tennessee and was said to be collecting over $6,000 a month in rent alone, an astronomical sum back then. Like Fortin, Church knew that money was power, and he used that power to lift up his community. Since black citizens were banned from public parks, he built one himself. In 1899, he bought a huge piece of land on Beale Street and created Church's Park and Auditorium. This wasn't just a park. It was a sanctuary with a concert hall and a massive auditorium that became the center of black culture and politics in Memphis, hosting everyone from President Teddy Roosevelt to the first blues musicians. And he didn't stop there. In 1906, he founded the Solvent Savings Bank and Trust Company, the city's first black-owned bank. This was revolutionary. It gave black families and business owners access to loans they could never get from white banks. The Church family legacy continued for generations. His daughter, Mary Church Terrell, became a national icon, a co-founder of the NAACP and a relentless activist. The Church family didn't just build a fortune, they built the institutions that would empower the black community in Memphis for decades to come. Now we move from the Mississippi River to the most cutthroat financial battlefield in the world, Wall Street. In the mid-19th century, this was a white-only club. But one man kicked the door down. His name was Jeremiah G. Hamilton, and he was Wall Street's first black millionaire. His white rivals called him the Prince of Darkness, and his story is one of pure, raw ambition and a financial mind that terrified the establishment. Hamilton's origins are a mystery. He first pops up in historical records in the most dramatic way possible, running a counterfeit coin scheme in Haiti in 1828. When the plot was discovered, a death sentence was put on his head, and he barely escaped back to New York. This was the high-stakes world Jeremiah Hamilton was made for. Back in New York, he jumped straight into the chaos of finance. This was an era with no rules, a time of wild speculation and corporate warfare. And Hamilton was better at the game than anyone. He was a master speculator who built his fortune through insurance scams and lawsuits. His signature move was to buy up the stock of companies that had been wiped out by disasters, like the Great Fire of New York in 1835, and then sue the insurance companies to pay out the full value. It made him feared, and it made him rich. He was so good and so aggressive that he became a direct rival to Cornelius Vanderbilt, the most powerful tycoon of the age. Their rivalry was the stuff of legend. While other black entrepreneurs were focused on serving the black community, Hamilton charged into the white-dominated world of high finance like no black man ever had before. His personal life was just as defiant. He married a white woman, bought a mansion in New Jersey, and owned stock in railroad companies that legally wouldn't even let him ride in their passenger cars. The press called him the Black Shark and the Prince of Darkness, names that dripped with racism, but also with a grudging respect for his talent. When Jeremiah Hamilton died in 1875, he left behind a fortune of $2 million. In today's money, that would be a massive fortune, likely worth over $50 million. At the time of his death, he was the richest black man in the United States. His story is completely different from the community-building legacies of the Fortons and Churches. Hamilton's legacy was one of pure financial conquest. He proved that a black man, with nothing but his own mind and nerve, could dominate the most predatory arena in American business and force Wall Street to bend to his will. While Jeremiah Hamilton was taking on Wall Street, another financial genius was quietly building an empire just across the river in Brooklyn. Her name was Elizabeth Gloster, and by the time she died in 1883, she was known as the wealthiest black woman in America. Her story is a masterclass in real estate and a powerful example of how black women used their business smarts to build fortunes and fund the revolution. Born a free woman in Virginia in 1817, she married Reverend James Gloster, and the two moved to New York, where Elizabeth's ambition took off. She opened a couple of stores, but she found her true calling in real estate. She began buying and running boarding houses, which were in huge demand in the growing city, and she didn't just run one or two. At her peak, she managed a portfolio of more than a dozen properties, including an upscale boarding house that catered to a mostly white clientele. This was her genius. She knew the market, she knew how to manage property, and she did it with incredible skill. When Elizabeth Gloster died, the value of her estate was a hot topic. Newspapers estimated it was somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000, but her lawyer claimed her net worth was even higher. No matter the exact number, her multi-million-dollar fortune in today's money made her one of the most important real estate moguls of her time, period. But just like the Fortons and the Churches, the Glosters' money was tied to the cause of abolition. Their home and their church were command centers for the anti-slavery movement in Brooklyn. They were a stop on the Underground Railroad, and Elizabeth used her fortune to fund the cause directly. When the famous abolitionist John Brown was planning his raid on Harper's Ferry, he stayed at the Gloster home, and they gave him money for his mission. Her charity was smart and strategic. She led the effort to create the Colored Orphans Asylum in Brooklyn and gave generously to small black churches in the South. Elizabeth Gloster was a double threat, a brilliant businesswoman who built a real estate empire from scratch and a dedicated freedom fighter who used her profits to bankroll the struggle. Her legacy is a powerful reminder that behind the great men of the abolitionist movement, there were often equally brilliant and wealthy women writing the checks. Now, we're moving into the 20th century, where the world of black enterprise was about to be turned upside down by two women. They would not only become millionaires, but they would also give tens of thousands of other black women a path to financial freedom. Their empires were built on hair care, but their legacies were built on economic independence. We're talking about the brilliant chemist Annie Turnbow Malone and her one-time student and eventual rival, the legendary Madam C.J. Walker. The story really starts with Annie Turnbow Malone, a true pioneer who often gets overshadowed by her more famous student. Born in 1869, Malone had a gift for chemistry. In the early 1900s, she developed a game-changing line of hair care products she called Poro, which didn't use the harsh, damaging chemicals that were common at the time. As a black woman, she couldn't just put her products in stores, so she became a marketing genius. She and her assistants went door to door, giving free demonstrations to win over customers. In 1902, she moved her business to St. Louis, and it exploded. It was there that a woman named Sarah Breedlove, who would later become Madam C.J. Walker, started working as one of her sales agents. Annie Malone's success was incredible. By the end of World War I, she was a multi-millionaire, with some estimates putting her peak fortune as high as $14 million, a number that would be worth hundreds of millions today. But Malone didn't just keep her wealth. In 1918, she built Poro College in St. Louis, a massive complex that was a factory, a training center, and a community hub all in one. Poro College trained an estimated 75,000 Poro agents around the world, giving black women a path to financial independence that was simply unheard of. Now, let's turn to Madam C.J. Walker. Born Sarah Breedlove in 1867, she worked as a poro agent for Malone before moving to Denver in 1906 to start her own haircare company. While the rivalry between the two women is famous, what Walker did was take the direct sales model she learned from Malone and scale it up to a level nobody had ever seen before. She traveled all over the country and the Caribbean, tirelessly promoting her Walker system and training an army of Walker agents. These agents were more than employees. They were entrepreneurs. Walker wasn't just selling hair products. She was selling a vision of economic freedom to black women. Her success was off the charts. By the time she died in 1919, she was celebrated as the first self-made female millionaire in American history. She became famous for her wealth and for showing it off as a symbol of what was possible. She built a stunning mansion in New York called Villa Lewaro, near the estates of the Rockefellers, making a bold statement that black wealth belonged among America's most powerful dynasties. Together, Malone and Walker created an entire industry and provided a path to economic freedom for countless black women. Though much of Malone's fortune was later lost to lawsuits and financial troubles, her initial impact was monumental. They established a model of business and philanthropy that continues to inspire people today. Our story now heads out to the West Coast, to a time before the gold rush, before California was even a state. We're going to a dusty little Mexican village called Yerba Buena, which would one day become San Francisco. And at the very center of its creation is a man named William Alexander Leidesdorff, a pioneering Afro-Caribbean entrepreneur who is considered one of America's first black millionaires. Born in 1810 in the Danish West Indies, Leidesdorff was of mixed heritage. As a young man, he moved to New Orleans, became a U.S. citizen, and made his name as a sea captain and merchant. But in 1841, he sailed for California and arrived in the sleepy village of Yerba Buena. Back then, Yerba Buena was a tiny settlement. Leidesdorff saw its potential. He didn't just move there, he started building it. He established the very first hotel in the village. He built the first commercial shipping warehouse on the waterfront. He launched the first steamboat to ever sail on the San Francisco Bay. He was single-handedly laying the groundwork for a future metropolis. To secure his business interests, Leidesdorff became a Mexican citizen, which allowed him to get a massive land grant of 35,000 acres. His political power grew too. When the U.S. took control of California, he was appointed as an American diplomat and served on the town's first city council. He was truly a founding father of San Francisco. But Leidesdorff's life was cut tragically short. He died suddenly in May of 1848 at only 38 years old, and here's where the story takes an unbelievable turn. Just a few months before he died, something happened on the land right next to his massive estate. Gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill. The California gold rush had begun. Leidesdorff died without ever knowing that his 35,000 acres were sitting next to some of the richest gold deposits in the world. When his estate was finally settled in 1856, it was valued at an almost unbelievable $1.45 million. This fortune, equivalent to well over $40 million today, cements his status as one of the first black millionaires in America. Because he died without a will, his vast fortune was caught up in legal battles for years. Today, Leidesdorff Street in San Francisco's financial district is named after him, a small tribute to the African founding father of California. Perhaps no story of early black wealth is as inspiring or as heartbreaking as the one built in Tulsa, Oklahoma. In the early 20th century, the Greenwood district of Tulsa was a shining example of black prosperity, a self-sufficient economic powerhouse known all over the country as Black Wall Street. And one of its main architects was a visionary named Ottawa W. Gurley. Born to freed slaves in 1868, Gurley was a self-educated man with a grand vision. In 1905, he moved to the booming oil town of Tulsa, bought 40 acres of land on the north side of the city's segregated railroad tracks, and set out to build a town for black people by black people. He started with a grocery store. Then he started selling plots of his land exclusively to other black families. This was the birth of Greenwood. Gurley was more than just a real estate developer. He was a community builder. He gave loans to other entrepreneurs, helping them start the businesses that would become the heart of Black Wall Street. His own empire grew to include a hotel, rental properties, and an employment agency. By 1921, O.W. Gurley owned over 100 properties in Greenwood, with a personal net worth that would be equivalent to between $7 and $14 million today. He was one of the wealthiest men in Tulsa. Thanks to the efforts of Gurley and other pioneers, Greenwood became an economic miracle. The 35-square block district had its own black-owned banks, hotels, theaters, and luxury shops. It was a closed economic loop where money circulated within the community, building incredible wealth. But this incredible success story fueled a fire of jealousy and hatred from the white community in Tulsa. In May of 1921, that hatred exploded into one of the worst acts of racial violence in American history, the Tulsa Race Massacre. For 2 days, a white mob, armed by city officials, descended on Greenwood. They looted and burned the entire district to the ground. When it was over, Black Wall Street was gone. Hundreds of black residents were murdered and thousands were left homeless. O.W. Gurley lost everything. His hotel, his properties, his entire fortune, all of it was destroyed. He was arrested and eventually fled to Los Angeles to escape being lynched. He died in California in 1935, his massive fortune completely wiped out. The story of O.W. Gurley is a painful but crucial reminder of the incredible heights black entrepreneurs could reach, and the brutal violence that could steal it all away in an instant. While many of the people on our list built their fortunes in business, our next story shows another path to power and wealth: politics. This is the story of Blanche Kelso Bruce, a man who rose from slavery to the U.S. Senate, building a powerful political and financial legacy along the way. Born into slavery in Virginia in 1841, Bruce was unusually able to get an education. After escaping during the Civil War, he moved to Mississippi during the Reconstruction era, a time of huge opportunity for newly freed African Americans. Bruce was talented and charismatic. He quickly became a wealthy landowner, but his real dream was politics. He rose through the ranks of the Republican Party until in 1874 the state legislature elected him to the United States Senate. This was a massive deal. Blanche K. Bruce was the first African American to serve a full 6-year term in the U.S. Senate. He was a respected legislator who fought for the rights of freedmen, Native Americans, and Chinese immigrants. He even presided over the Senate on one occasion, another historic first. His position in Washington, D.C. made him one of the most powerful black men in the country. He and his wife, Josephine, became the center of black high society in the capital, placing them firmly in the elite circle of wealthy African American families. After his Senate term, President James A. Garfield appointed Bruce as the Register of the Treasury. This was another huge achievement. As Register, his signature appeared on all of the nation's paper money, making Blanche K. Bruce the first African American whose signature was printed on U.S. currency. The position came with a great salary and immense influence, which further secured his family's wealth. Bruce invested his money wisely in land and stocks, and by the time he died in 1898, he had built a significant fortune. His son, Roscoe Conkling Bruce, graduated from Harvard and became a prominent educator. The Bruce family represents a unique kind of black wealth, one built not in the markets of New York, but in the halls of power in Washington, D.C., showing how political power, for a short time, provided a path to creating a powerful legacy. Sometimes the story of wealth isn't about one family, but about a whole community of interconnected families who created their own exclusive world. That was the case for the black elite of St. Louis, Missouri. Long before Annie Turnbow Malone built her Poro empire there, St. Louis was home to a colored aristocracy whose wealth and social status set them apart. The roots of this elite class go all the way back to the early 19th century. Many of these families were descended from free people of color who had owned land for decades. They built their fortunes in skilled trades like barbering and catering, and most importantly, in real estate. As St. Louis grew, anyone who owned land saw their wealth explode. What really defined this group was how exclusive they were. This was a closed society. They started their own social clubs and held formal debutante balls. Education was everything. They sent their children to the best private schools and colleges. And most importantly, they married each other. Families like the Clamorgans, Mordecais, and Pelagies joined their fortunes and their bloodlines, creating a web that protected their wealth for generations. A key figure here was Cyprian Clamorgan, who, in 1858, wrote a book called The Colored Aristocracy of St. Louis. In it, he laid out the fortunes and family histories of this elite class, revealing a world of established wealth that was totally hidden from white society. He described families who owned entire city blocks and lived in beautiful homes with servants. One of those families was the Pelagie family. Pelagie, a free woman of color, had acquired a lot of land early in St. Louis' history. Her descendants managed that real estate portfolio, becoming one of the city's wealthiest black families. Their story was typical of the St. Louis elite, wealth that came from land, carefully passed down and protected by strategic marriages. This class was also dedicated to community leadership, funding schools, churches, and orphanages. However, it was also a society that often prioritized lighter skin, reflecting the complex and painful issue of colorism that existed within the black community at the time. The story of the St. Louis elite shows how a whole group of families could build and sustain generational wealth by creating their own parallel society, ensuring their legacy would last for over a century. We've gone from the docks of Philadelphia to the mansions of DC, from the ashes of Tulsa to the glamour of the Harlem Renaissance. We've seen how these incredible families and communities built empires. But that brings us to the big question: where is all that old money now? The hard truth is that for most of these dynasties, the fortunes are gone. The same forces that made their success so incredible are the same ones that made keeping that wealth almost impossible. Unlike white dynasties like the Rockefellers or Vanderbilts, black families with old money had no systemic support. They faced a constant generational attack from racial violence, discriminatory laws, and targeted legal battles. Annie Turnbow Malone's story is a perfect example. She built a massive empire, but a nasty divorce, endless IRS investigations, and the Great Depression wiped her fortune out. The wealth of O.W. Gurley wasn't just lost, it was burned to the ground in a single act of terrorism. The huge estate of William Leidersdorf was mostly swallowed up by administrators, with his family only getting a fraction of its true gold rush value. Even for families who avoided total disaster, just holding on was a struggle. Fortunes were diluted as they were passed down to more and more heirs, and the simple economic pressure of operating in a hostile, segregated country took its toll. But their legacy isn't just about money. Their true inheritance is the institutions they built and the progress they paid for. The Fortin family's money fueled the abolitionist movement. The Church family's bank empowered Black Memphis for decades. Madam C.J. Walker's fortune helped fund the NAACP and the Harlem Renaissance. While direct, dynastic fortunes on the scale of their white peers are incredibly rare, the spirit of these families is alive and well. We see it in the families of modern black business titans. Figures like Robert F. Smith and David Stewart are building new, massive fortunes, and they are building them on a foundation laid by these early pioneers. The stories of America's original black elite are a critical, forgotten part of our history. They are tales of unbelievable genius and resilience. They challenge our whole understanding of American wealth and force us to see the powerful currents of black capitalism that have always been there, often just below the surface. They built fortunes, they funded revolutions, and they created legacies that are woven into the very fabric of Black America. The world of America's black old money is a universe of forgotten empires and hidden histories. The names of Fortin, Church, Hamilton, and Walker belong in the pantheon of great American entrepreneurs. Their stories are not just black history, they are American history. They prove that the dream of building something that lasts, of creating a legacy, has always been a powerful force in the black community, even in the nation's darkest hours. What we've uncovered today is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more stories of black innovators, financiers, and trailblazers that have been left out of the history books. If you want to continue this journey of discovery and help bring these essential stories to the forefront, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have turned on notifications. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these stories. And in the comments below, let us know which of these families fascinated you the most. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.